Welcome back to the His and Her Money Show with America's #1 money couple. I'm Talaat.
And I'm Tai, and we're from hisandhermoney.com, where we're managing money, marriage, and everything in between.
So glad to have you guys back here with us because we have another fantastic debt-free story to share with you. We're going to be talking with a couple by the name of Chris and Helen, who paid off an astounding $76,000 worth of debt.
Absolutely amazing. I love it when we have couples that come on the show because you know what? It shows a sense of coming into agreement, and becoming one. And they were one in their finances that they became debt-free. So let's take a look at their story.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Helen. Welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Hey, thanks for having us on. We appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
We are super glad to have you here because you all have a great story to tell about the journey to debt freedom. We know a lot of people are tuned in right now who are thinking about trying to get out of debt, who are currently in the fight to get out of debt. And so we know that this story that you all are going to tell is going to help them no matter where they are to either get started or continue moving forward. But before we get into your journey, can you just take a moment and introduce yourself to the audience and let them know what you're all about?
Well, my name is Chris Hawkins.
And I am Helen Hawkins.
And we are a debt-free couple, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that as we go along. I have started a podcast and a blog several years ago that is called Dr. Thrift, and I do speaking, writing, and coaching to people who themselves want to become debt-free. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to do that. I'm also a high school teacher during the daytime. And I teach mostly personal finance to high school juniors and seniors. So I live this all day long. How cool is that?
That is incredible. That is incredible. Now, you guys were once in a bunch of debt, and you paid it off and became debt free. So let's go back to the beginning. Talk about how much debt that you all were in and talk about the type of debt that it was.
Okay, the debt was $76,000 plus, somewhere between $76,000 $77,000. We had car loans, we had credit card debt, we had student loan debt, and we had business debt. So we had a little bit of everything, including plus a mortgage, but that $77,000 obviously does not include the mortgage. So that's the business was debt that business debt was debt. We didn't even have a business anymore. It had gone belly up after about 6 months. So the big piece of advice I tell people there is don't invest in something that you don't understand. Right. And that's exactly what I did. I helped my brother invest in a small television station down in South Georgia. And when you don't have revenue coming in faster than the expenses going out, it's real quick to go out of business. So we found ourselves more than half of that debt was in business debt. Yeah. And it was about one of the credit cards was primarily just for that business. And we even had a second mortgage that we had done for some of the money to pay for that business. And we had a business loan at a bank down there and then a private investor. And so a good bit of that $76,000 was in business debt. And I think about another $20,000 was roughly student loans. And then a couple of credit cards here, and I think a few $1,000s on the car by that point.
You know what? That doesn't sound too abnormal. It sounds like the type of debt that most of our country has. So I'm curious, Helen, what was it that kind of opened you guys' eyes, gave you this awakening? What made you realize that although you guys weren't necessarily doing things as far as the type of debt that you have from student loans to credit cards and things of that nature, that's your neighbors have that, your family has that, your friends have that. So what was it that kind of sparked you guys to say, you know what, although this is normal, this doesn't have to be our normal, and I don't think we should be doing it this way?
Well, actually, some of those loans were coming up pretty quickly. So we had a very short time period to pay it off. And that's when we just started looking at everything. And in my case, panic set in. But with Chris, he luckily heard a radio broadcast, and that convinced him we need to try it. It's worth it. What else can we do at this point? You know, we weren't going to be able to pay off the debt that was coming due in time. So,
And it's important, I think, to say that we had tried several times in the past to get out of debt, to get our finances in order. And it's typical. You've talked to plenty of people that they get started and then a hiccup comes. And when a hiccup comes, it's right back to the old way again. And that was us. On multiple occasions we had started and things didn't go right and we just gave up. And we knew that we needed to be doing better. We knew that living paycheck to paycheck wasn't the most comfortable feeling in the world. So she mentioned the radio program. I know you're familiar with Dave Ramsey. I was actually turning onto the radio dial to listen to another person who a colleague of mine had told me to listen to. And so I switched over to that AM button on the radio that nobody uses anymore. And I went to that station. That's a station here in town that I didn't even know existed. And hit it. And it wasn't the person that I was listening for, but it was Dave Ramsey. It was July 4th, and they were doing a July 4th special on ways that people were destroying their credit cards. And to make a very long story short, at the end of that segment that he was talking with a particular caller, he mentioned a new book called The Total Money Makeover. And I thought, well, here I am at a point in life where I'm trying to figure out how to better manage my money. Went to the library, to the bookstore actually, and picked up a copy of that book. And like many other people, I read it and I said, you know what, this makes perfect sense to me. It's stuff that you and I, we already know, but somehow hearing it or reading it from someone else, putting it in a new way, just resonated with me. And I came home and I said, okay, we've got $19,500 worth of debt that's due in about 8 months, 9 months, something like that. That was the private investor who that loan was coming due, and I had personally guaranteed it. So I sat down, this was early January, put pen to paper, and came up with a plan, introduced it to Helen, and she kind of looked at me like I was crazy, but a little bit of faith, I think, would you say, just said, let's go for it. What's the worst that could happen? We fall up a little short, but it was kind of the moment when I said, I'm not going to borrow money to pay somebody else. I'm going to come up with this money. That's what Dave wrote, and I'm going to do it. And it began a journey that has been very, very beneficial to both of us as of this point in life now.
Now, you said a lot there, and I want to dig into a comment that you made, the point that you all tried doing this before on more than one occasion, but somehow, some way, this time was different. I think that there are people listening right now who have tried to get their finances in order before. It didn't work. So in their mind, it's like, well, I tried that. This stuff just doesn't work. So what was the difference this time compared to those other times that made it stick?
I think for me, it was, first of all, tired of being tired of failing, and reading the book and having now a plan, and the whole idea of an emergency fund to begin with, having $1,000 in the bank that you can fall back on versus what I tried before. Let's just go gung-ho, and the next thing you know, something comes up and you're using that piece of plastic again, and there you go, you feel like a failure. So it was tired of being tired. It was having a plan, the 7 baby steps that he talks about. And we also had an early success where right after we made that decision, she had just changed to a new employer who, for the first 6 months, instead of having her on salary, had her on an hourly wage. Right. And it was like a week afterwards, they said, hey, we need you to work 60, 70 hours a week. And the overtime created some extra income that really just, it gave us some fuel and it gave us some inspiration. It's like when we made a decision to go for it, things fell in place in life that says you're going to be a success this time. And I made it a competition more so than her. Yeah. And I tell my people all the time that I coach and people who ask for advice, let's compete. Let's make a game out of it. And it wasn't thinking of it as $77,000. It was thinking of it, I've got to find $1,000 and then 76 other ways to do it. And breaking it down into chunks made it much more manageable. And it became, okay, how am I going to come up with another 100? How am I going to come up with another 50? How am I going to come up with another 200? And that's when working in conjunction with a budget. And I really had never done a budget before. I kind of accidentally came across the debt snowballed, didn't even know it existed, but had created one, but didn't have a plan behind it. And in the book, Dave talks about how it takes 3 months before your budget begins to work. And so knowing that, going back into it and having gone, yeah, he's right. When you get those hiccups, you go, it's expected. This is exactly what he said would happen. And it makes it easier to move forward. So a lot of things there. I'm not sure what you think in terms of being motivated.
I was in panic mode thinking, we're not going to be able to pay our monthly bills. We're not going to be able to pay, the power, the gas, all of that, if we've got to put all this money to pay this man back. So, but, I think I was okay when he came up with the budget. I was a little scared. Especially we cut back on a lot of things, which was scary with 3 little kids. So, but we did it. I mean, it worked out.
So Helen, let's talk about that a little bit more. You had the anxiety of these bills coming due. Chris goes and hears about this crazy man on the radio and grabs his book, comes up with this crazy plan. And at the same time, all you know is these bills are coming due. And now Chris comes with this crazy plan. You have anxiety, you have fear, but yet you push all that to the side and you move forward. You put in the work, you put in the effort. Some people get stuck at fear. Some people get stuck at anxiety. How were you able to push through those strong emotions and put one foot in front of the other and go for it anyway?
I guess in my opinion, I felt like our back was up against the wall, and I guess I'm one of those people that I come out swinging when my back's against the wall. And I became determined too. We're going to make it work. And okay, I'll admit some of our food wasn't the best, SpaghettiOs and really cheap things, but it worked. And we knew it wouldn't be an extreme amount of time that we would have to do all these changes. It was just in the short term. And I was willing to do that. I'm not sure my kids were, but luckily, I think they were young enough that it didn't do any damage to them. But we were able to do it. And the more I saw it working and getting there, the better I felt. And I started to get a sense of relief. I'm a stressful person anyway, and I worry about everything. So in the beginning, it was very difficult for me. But, just as you see the little improvements, the little milestones, and it feels, you get a sense of accomplishment. And then you see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and you're like, okay, this is working. I'm slowly getting there. And then it builds on itself. And then towards the end, I was just amazed. I was like, I can't believe we did it. It was mind-boggling.
And I'll say this. I see on Facebook a lot of times some groups that I'm in, people who are trying to get out of debt. And they'll say, it may not seem like much, but I paid off $50 on a credit card today. And to them, it may not seem like much, but I tell them that's huge. That's a huge accomplishment. And $50 here and then $50 there. Next thing you know, you've really gotten somewhere, and you've got to celebrate those small victories. And I think she's absolutely right. You get some small victories to begin with, helps build that momentum, and then it stops being fearful, and it becomes, we're both very competitive, a game. And that's, it's. I tell people, put something on the wall that you a picture of something you want to accomplish, something that you want to eventually buy down the road, and use that as motivation. I'm much less fearful. I'm much more of let's just jump in and go for it. But I'm thankful that she was able to overcome that fear and be willing to go with it. And I would say that to anybody in your audience is there's a lot of fear that comes up, but fear is not getting you anywhere right now. You've still got fear in your life. How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? It's such a wonderful place to get to. And as John Acuff mentions all the time, you got to drop the fear. If you're scared about something, write it down and tell yourself, that I can overcome that and move forward.
I mean, to me, I kind of felt like we were pretty much at rock bottom, although I know looking back, we really, truly weren't at rock bottom, but it felt that way. And so I had, faith in him. The only way is up at this point. There's nothing much we could do other than go up. So I figured, why not try it? Let's just see if it works. If it doesn't work in a couple weeks, or if we don't see any progress, then that's fine. We'll shift gears and figure out something else.
And the important thing is to remember that your current plan is not working. why not try something different? So,
Right. Exactly. It reminds me a lot of the time that I spent overseas in Iraq. Right before we were going into the combat zone, our colonel held a formation and we were all standing there and he was giving us a speech. And one of the things that stuck out the most in that speech was he said there's only one difference between a hero and a coward. Both of them have fear, but a coward runs away from fear and a hero runs towards it. It's not that fear won't be present, it's what you do with the fear. And what you guys did was, although this massive pressure was mounting on you guys and it caused fear and anxiety, you guys ran toward it. You guys buckled down. You got on the plan. You started eating SpaghettiOs and you started working overtime shifts. And you guys just said, our backs are against the wall. There's no way to go but up. And you guys got to work. So hats off to you guys for doing that. I'm curious, how long from start to finish did it take for you guys to pay off this debt?
it was a little less than 3 years to pay all of it off. We did hit the first 19,500 actually a month early. I was able to pay that back a month earlier, a large part due to the overtime, and I've kept those paycheck stubs just kind of as a memory. Matter of fact, I've kept every budget that we've ever done pretty much. I got a stack about that thick of them, but I do have those paycheck stubs, and it's interesting sometimes to go back and look at.
I was tired.
Yes, very tired. But then once you get that done, it took us roughly another 2 years to pay the other 50,000 plus. And but like she said, it became easier. It became something you wanted to do. And yep.
And you could see it rolling in from one into the other. So when we paid off one thing, all of that money then went into the next one, and it went so much quicker, and it just kept doing that. And to me, it was kind of exciting at that point, because I'm like, I never would have thought that we could have put that much at one time towards one of our payments. So.
And it's not only cool to see your debt snowball get shorter, but your budget gets smaller too. It's amazing how easy it is to budget when you've got fewer items on your budget.
Yeah.
And if you look at how much, I'm sure most people are like we were, how many line items in your budget are various types of debt. And that's one other small little thing to look forward to when you get out of debt, is that managing your money becomes a whole lot easier. And you can automate and put that money now into savings and investments and various other things that you never would have been able to before.
Now, you said a word repeatedly that probably made a lot of people in the audience cringe. When they hear that word, it brings up a lot of emotions. You said that word, budget.
Yes, sir, I did.
Talk to us about the role that the budget played in you all's success in becoming debt-free.
You want to tackle that one?
Well, honestly, he came up with the budgets. I argued about the budgets a lot.
And it's in a good way, not argued as in screaming, fighting like people have a tendency to do with their money. But I typically am the one that does the budget. But how has it, even today, allowed us to manage our money?
Oh, it's helped immensely. I mean, we're able to budget well in advance for anything that we want that's coming up. We have the holidays coming up. I've already got all that budgeted, and I'm not worried about that. We have a son in college. We're able to budget for that, all his payments. So it's a lot of relief on my part, especially since I worry a lot. But, every once in a while, there's some disagreement still, like, okay, well, we're going to cut back on the food budget or something like that. And I'll be like, no, you can't do that. I want to have it. But, when I look at the overall budgets and the month to month and what we're aiming for, I can accept it better. And I'm like, okay, fine. I understand why we're doing that. Yes, you're right. We need to do that. Or sometimes he'll come up a little bit in it too.
Well, I'll say this is it's allowed us a level of freedom that we never would have before. And I think it's important for people to understand when it comes to a budget, it should not be looked at as something that's restricting, that tells me what I can't do. Now, if you're working on getting out of debt, it may feel that way. But again, when you start having those victories, it's much more bearable. But what people should look at a budget as is, me telling my money what to do before I get it. And that's such a freeing experience. to have a plan for it, to know what you're going to do with it. And when you do get yourself out of debt, it puts yourself in a position to do things that you never would have been able to before. So when we go on vacation now, it's paid for before we leave, every bit of it. Even the spending money it's in the bank before we go. Mm-hmm. And we've had a chance to go to Costa Rica for 12 days. We went back a couple of years ago with our children for 10 days. We've taken all kinds of trips that are paid for before we go. And that's what I want your audience to understand, is that's what a budget gets you to down the road, is to tell yourself yes in so many ways. But even while you're in those early stages, you're telling yourself yes in those things that are a priority for you. What is really important? Well, if getting out of debt's important, well, then that budget is where you're actually telling your money, this is what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. Now, there are times when some unexpected things may come up. Yeah. And rather than dip into savings or dip into emergencies, because we lived so tight in those first few years, we have that ability sometimes to say, okay, let's buckle down this month and squeeze a few extra dollars, just like we were trying to do when we got out of debt, to put towards that unexpected thing, so that we don't have to dip into savings, we don't have to dip into that emergency fund. And it's true that when you get control of your money and you work towards accomplishing goals, you have less emergencies in your life. And by that, I mean, emergencies happen, but you don't really notice them. Not like you do when you're living paycheck to paycheck. So that's what I would say. Remember that the budget's a freeing thing, but you've got to give it enough time to start working and begin to see the benefits of it.
And they're not always perfect. I mean, you're going to go through and you're going to adjust them. I mean, maybe one month you realize, oh, I didn't have enough money to save or to put enough towards that bill or this credit card or whatever when you're in the beginning. You just keep adjusting it. That's all you have to do. It's not like it's set in stone and you have to be the exact same every single month. You can adjust it as you need to, or, if you feel like there's something coming up that you need to do, or in my case, I would say, like, for instance, if you had a birthday coming up for a family member and you needed to get a present, but you were still in debt and you're working towards it, you just adjust your budget a few months or a few weeks, ahead of time, maybe a few months, depending on what you're going to get, and you just add a little towards that. And that's a lot better than at the last second going, oh my gosh, I need X amount of money and I don't have it. So that, to me, that's good because you're planning ahead. And I'd much prefer to plan ahead than to wait at the last second and be scrambling for money or figuring out how are we going to do this? I can't make it work. What am I going to do?
It creates less stress. It really does.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. Can't overlook that. That's one of the biggest benefits of this whole thing is stress reduction, stress elimination. More so than the debt elimination is the stress elimination. I mean, that's the big win in all this. All this sacrifice gets you to that place of not stressing about money, not fighting about money, the anxiety being gone. That's what this is all about. Now, you guys went on a journey from start to finish. It took you 3 years. I mean, you guys paid off an immense amount of debt. I'm sure that there were highs and lows throughout the course of this thing. How were you all able to maintain motivation? Because people are not short of motivation to start, to attempt to get out of debt. But it's when those unforeseen things happen, like as you guys have talked about, come up, that motivation wanes sometimes and sometimes disappears altogether. How are you all able to not lose your motivation and continue to move forward and eventually cross the finish line?
Well, I think also, it might have to do with your personality too. I mean, I'm one of those ones that if you mess up, okay, so what? Accept it, move on, start again. Chris, unfortunately, is more of it's all or nothing. But I will say with this, if we slipped up, he didn't lose the faith in it. And he was like, all right, we're going to go back and we're going to go harder on it. We're going to do it better. Whereas I'm more of laid back in that respect. And I'm like, oh, so what? We messed up this time. Let's just readjust, move on, and keep going. And I think that helps. And
well, I think it's also important to have common goals. So what is it that together we want to accomplish? And we're able to dream so much bigger now than we ever probably would have been able to prior, but we set goals that together we wanted to accomplish. And that helps to hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
And knowing that you're helping your spouse accomplish a goal that the two of you have set together, one that both of you share together, that's important. And the big thing was to pay off that initial debt. But then when we got there, let's just keep running with this thing. It's when you get that traction going, that's helpful. Like I mentioned, playing a game with it. Break it down into smaller chunks, and just attack the one that you're working on at that moment. When you get that accomplished, work on the next one. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's times that you're going to slip up, and I think that's what was helpful about the Dave Ramsey book for me, is he pretty much put that in there. There are times that things are going to come up. That's what you have an emergency savings for. If you need to, you tap into it, you pause, go back, fill up your emergency fund, and you keep going. And knowing ahead of time that there are going to be hiccups. When it occurs, you're like, oh, that's to be expected. It doesn't become as much of an event that creates in your mind failure. And she's right. I'm very much, by gosh, we're going to accomplish this. And I tend to have a tendency to get devastated to some degree if we don't hit those goals. I'm very, very hard charging. But I had to overcome that, knowing that we had some goals that we were going to accomplish together. And having started before and failed, and this time knowing where the hiccups were going to come, and when they did come, okay, that's normal. Made it a little bit easier.
Awesome. Now, what type of impact did this debt-free journey that you guys just went through have on your marriage overall? I'm
going to let her take that one.
We weren't getting along too well when we were in a lot of debt, honestly. We were fighting a lot and a lot of anger. And now I don't think we hardly ever argue, especially about money. I mean, we might argue over a TV station or something, but, just minor stuff. But as far as finances, it definitely changed us. I mean, we were, or at least I should say, I was very angry that we had gotten into the situation we had, that the business failed, that we didn't see it coming, that we had all this stuff we had to get done, and I didn't like being in debt. I had a family growing up. My dad made a lot of money, but my mom spent a lot of money, so I heard all the arguments growing up. I did not want to be like that, and yet there we were just like that, and it was very stressful and upsetting to me, and it made me angry.
And I grew up in a household almost identical, where my mother had a tendency to spend and use credit cards, and I mean, even to this day, she still struggles. I hate to admit that, but I give her advice, but sometimes it's very difficult, I guess, for a child to give their parent advice. But I grew up in that same type of household where there were a lot of money fights and disagreements with money, and I don't want to say that. Well, let me just say this: it did make me uncomfortable living in a house that way. But that was all I knew. And so you get, a credit card offer when you're in college. I'm going to take it. Next thing you know, something happens to the car. You're in college, you use the credit card, and then you don't realize it, but you're heading down that same path. And I just think that we kind of came to the point where we realized that we were both acting like our parents to some degree. And we didn't want that for ourselves. And again, setting those common goals, I think did a lot. It gave us something to try to accomplish together. And that's kind of the way things have been since. Yeah. Is we set goals and we work on them together. And that communication that comes from creating the budget. That's another thing that a budget does, is it allows you to communicate, but you got to be willing to give and take. You can't get everything that you want. Right. And if you try to get everything that you want, it's only going to lead to more problems. Then a budget becomes something that someone's beating someone else up with. And we never let it become that. But today, it's the disagreements are on who's going to pick up the kid from something, or those types of things. And they're very minor.
What are we going to eat for dinner?
Yeah, that's sometimes the biggest disagreements we have. And that's where you get to when you're out of debt and you have a plan and you have goals that you're trying to accomplish. And I want your audience to understand that, is when you work together, sure, there's going to be some disagreements, but remember that you're on the same path together. Remember what you're trying to accomplish and get done.
And another thing, I know I've talked to several of my fellow employees with this, and they have disagreements about doing a budget and going through all this stuff. And they're like, well, what if I want to go to a movie? Or what if I want to go out to dinner and a movie? What do I do? And I'm like, you just put it in a budget. Okay, when you're talking with your spouse or your significant other and saying, okay, on this next pay period, I've got a family function to go to, or I want to go to a movie and a dinner, or I've got some party I'm going to, I need money for an outfit or whatever it is. You just talk to them and you figure it out and you put it in your budget. Now, those aren't necessarily things you're going to have in every single budget. Obviously, they're just things that come up, but you got to talk about it in advance so that you can go ahead and make sure you can cover it in your budget. And I know there's several people I've talked to who are my friends, and they're like, well, if I want to do it, I just got to go do it. I shouldn't have to do that. And I'm like, but then you're using your credit card if you don't have the money for it. And that's where you get in the trouble. And they're like, oh, well, I pay it off. I'm like, but you don't always do it because you have a balance and you're paying that balance off. And they're like, well, yeah, but it's not very much. And I'm like, if you would just do the budget and talk about what you want to do and think ahead, then you're fine. And it's really not as bad as, people think it is. I know the word budget is a horrible word, but once you've started it and you figure out all your different bills that you pay every month and the things that you want to do coming up, you just put money towards it. I mean, you may only put $2 towards your haircut fund or something, and have that for several months or several weeks or whatever it takes. In other words, it's not all at once. You don't have to do any one thing all at once. And I think that's what people are thinking at the budget. They got to have everything in there all at once and have everything covered. You don't. I mean, you could even just do an entertainment fund every pay period and just, put a few dollars into that. And maybe you don't use it for 3, 4, 5 months or whatever, or maybe you use it right away. I mean, you just got to think about it and discuss it and come up with an agreement.
And that's the important point, getting back to your question about how it's done for our marriage is, we have normal discussions now. It's weird and cool at the same time. I mean,
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that at all. I think a lot of people, especially that are married, that are listening right now, they're on the other side of that. They're like, all they do is fight about money. And all the fights that they have are only about money. And so what you're saying is like almost foreign to them. Like, you mean you guys don't really argue about money anymore? And Ty and I are the same way. It's like all this stuff that you go through during the journey, it's like pruning all that stuff off of you. And if you can figure out how to talk or communicate about money in your marriage, you can talk about anything. It's an open pathway to every other area of your marriage that you need to communicate about. And so I think that's one of the incredible side benefits to the journey to debt freedom, especially for couples. Speaking of the journey to debt freedom, talk to us, describe to us, paint the picture for us, that moment when you made your final debt payment.
I'll let you do that.
Well, it was for a student loan. I had gone back to work on a master's degree in education, and originally I had a business degree, went into the business world, so to speak, in restaurant management, and decided I wanted to teach and coach. So I had to go back to school to get the teaching certification, and had borrowed a bunch of money for that master's degree because I basically quit working to do that. So there were 3 of those student loan debts, all with the same company, just multiple ones. And one of the, I guess, benefits of having lost a bunch of money in a business is we eventually got to write off that loss, which helped get us a nice little income tax refund, which we really hadn't gotten for several years because we'd stopped getting them so we could use that money to pay off debt. And it got to the point as we were getting towards the end that almost every week I had to get on there and pay something. I got a few extra dollars here. Let me get on there. It went down another 100. And then I got that tax refund, and I'm like, that's enough. Yes. And I logged online and typed that final number in that it had there and hit that button. And we knew we had done it. We knew we had done it. Now, there's that moment where you go, okay, now I got to see it come through my bank, and I got to see the statement when it's zero. So there's that little bit of moment just to make sure you did it all right. But I can't put into words the idea. Now, we did have the benefit of calling Dave Ramsey's show and screaming that we were debt free with our children,
Yes.
and that was an important moment for I think for our kids to witness that and be a part of that. And I think it's helped to shape their perspective on managing money as well. Now, our oldest child was, I think, 13 at the time,
Yeah.
14 something. Well, I was 13 when we started the journey. She was about 16 when we finished. She's now 24, doing very well with her own money. And
Very frugal.
so I say that because that moment we got to share with them a few days later when we called to scream that we were debt free. Then it became, okay, now what do we do with all this extra money? And that became a whole new excitement. It's like, well, now we got to create another dream, another goal of what we're going to do with that.
And we were used to that amount of money that we were using to pay that off, so we just kept moving that into, I think we put it in another account, didn't we?
we were able to make some adjustments we saved for a little bit, obviously, for a bigger emergency fund, and then began to put that towards retirement, 401k, which we really had never done before. So it created such excitement that now it's like, what else can we do? And that's continued. It's still that way 10 years later. What can we dream and do that we never thought imaginable? And yep.
Yeah.
Now, looking back over that whole journey, what do you think was the biggest life lesson that you all took away from the process?
I would say that you are capable of, one of the things I would say is you're capable of accomplishing a lot more than you think you can. When you set your mind to something and you've got a shared goal that both of you are working on together, it really is amazing what you can accomplish. It may not seem like it at the time, but feed off that excitement, feed off of those small victories, and realize that you can achieve great and big things in your life. All it takes is believing in yourself, and it takes working towards that goal. I mean, that's one of the big things I've learned.
To me, you just don't give up. Even if it's just a little bit that you're paying extra on something and you're just doing it every month, just a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. If you just keep doing that, eventually you're going to see the rewards for it. You're going to see the balance go down. You're going to see everything changing. And if you just don't give up and know that just every little bit helps, I think that's just don't give up would be my comment on that.
Biggest life lesson?
Biggest life lesson. Yeah. Thank you. I'm getting a senior moment. Sorry.
I love it. Don't give up. If there's somebody tuned into the show right now who, quite frankly, they're thinking about giving up. They don't think they have what it takes, maybe even to get started in becoming debt free. They loved your story. They're like, wow, that's great for them, but they're not sure if they can replicate it for themselves. What words of encouragement would you offer to that person right now?
I would say that you can do it. I mean, that sounds simple on a very basic level, but at the same time, it's very profound. Your current plan is got you where you are right now. And there's a scene in a movie, Days of Thunder, that I like to quote to people quite often, where the two characters, one of them's a race car driver, one of them's a crew chief, and they're both very good at what they do, but they're having no success at what they're doing together. And one day the crew chief says to the driver, look, I want you to run, I think, 20 laps my way, and I want you to run 20 laps your way, and let's see how the tires look afterwards. Let's see who's faster afterwards. And so he does 20 laps his way, 20 laps the crew chief's way, and finds out that there's a better way to do things. And so I would say that before you give up, think differently. Allow yourself to try something that you've never done before, and recognize that you're gonna have struggles in the beginning. You can always go back to your old way of doing it. You can always give up later if that's what you decide to do. But don't stay where you are right now. Always try to be a little bit better tomorrow than you are today. And I share that with people all the time. Just be 1% better tomorrow than you are today. The next day, be 1% better than you are. And just allow yourself to see where you get to, and give yourself some time to accomplish. But deep down, you got to believe. And if you're not in a position to believe, it's difficult for me or anybody else to say anything to you that's going to help you to overcome that per se. But give it a shot. That's all I would say.
And I would say, just look at it and try it out for 30 days. Just 30 days. Make yourself a little bit uncomfortable. Change, how much you're spending on your entertainment or your food or whatever it is. Maybe don't go get your coffee or don't get donuts or whatever it is. Just make yourself uncomfortable a little bit for 30 days and take that extra money that you normally spend on something and add it to your debt and just see how it looks, how much money you've saved up to pay extra on a debt. And you're going to see a little change. I mean, it may not be a huge change, but it is something. And if you just keep doing that, and then maybe, that if the 30 days you see, okay, maybe I have $50 extra to put towards it, then maybe think about something else. Say, okay, taking that out of my lifestyle wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe I can change or tweak something else a little bit. Maybe I don't use the brand name of a food or something. I don't know, just something. Just make yourself a little bit uncomfortable to begin with and try it. Don't go full force hog into it. It'll stress you out and it'll burn you out, or at least that's what I would think.
And stop having the mentality that you have to have everything now. I would say you have the ability when you get out of debt and you get your finances in order to do things, to be honest with you. I think you know this as well, to buy things, to go on vacations, to put your kids through college debt-free, that never would have been able to do before. Never. And allow yourself to say, let me be patient a little bit. Let me tell myself no. 30 days, 60 days, just to see where I get. And I think you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish. But you got to start. Start's the key.
There you go. Great advice, guys. Great advice. So tell our audience all about drthrift.com and how they can connect with you.
So drthrift.com is the name that I came up with. I think the word thrift it's such a phenomenal word. It's a word that's been lost in our vocabulary. And nowadays when people hear the word thrift, they think thrift shop. They think old, used things. But it was a virtue that's been around in this country since the founding, since the Pilgrims came here. And real quickly, it simply means to be content in life, to be happy with where you are right now, but don't settle for where you are. Be happy where you are, but always have goals to be better tomorrow than you are today. It means to be frugal. And by frugal, that means sometimes spending more money to buy better quality things, but just being careful of how you spend your money, analyzing your needs versus wants, and being a faithful steward. Make sure that you give. Make sure you follow God's advice for what He wants you to do with your money if you're a faithful person. And then be industrious. Industrious is another one of those words that means just bring value to people. Bring value to people. The more that you bring value to people, that may mean working harder. It may mean starting your own business. It may be going out of your way to help somebody. The more value that you bring to people, the more marketable you are, and the more you will be rewarded monetarily. And so, but I think nobody would disagree with living on those four principles, and that's what it means to be thrifty. And so I just find that word to be so amazing. And when I went and did my doctorate degree in education, I did my dissertation on financial education. And I graduated with my doctorate degree, and I thought, hey, I like that word thrift. Let's put them together, and there's your Dr. Thrift brand. So Dr. Thrift, I provide encouragement. I provide hope to people, provide knowledge. I try to do a weekly podcast. We haven't been as good at it lately because I'm working on some other projects. And like you, I've got a full-time job during the day, and it's difficult sometimes, but you can get the free podcast at drthrift.com. I've got several small little articles there that people may find useful. There is a opt-in where you can sign in with your email address. We don't sell it to anybody. You'll get the 9 financial principles that I think everyone should follow. I believe that we can take everything that we teach about personal finance and narrow it down to one of 9 principles. And so you can get that there. We've got some exciting things coming up. I am working on a full-fledged budgeting course. I get so many questions on budgeting, much like we've talked about today. Why should you budget? How do you go about getting started? What do you do when there are hiccups? And so I'm in the middle of working on that. We hope to launch that in early January. And I do financial coaching. So those people who need that one-on-one time, you can find out information at drthrift.com. So hopefully that tells you a little bit about who I am, how I came about the name. I am passionate about helping people in any way that I can to better manage their money. Feel free to reach out to me at drthrift at drthrift.com. That's drthrift.com. And we've got a Facebook page. You can find all that information on the website. And anybody got any questions out there in your audience, feel free to reach out. I'll be more than happy to help any way I can.
Well, Chris and Helen, this has been incredible. Your story is inspirational, and we are truly appreciative of you all coming on the show and sharing it with our audience today. Thank you.
And we thank you for having us on. We always love telling our story and sharing with people. And
wow, wasn't that amazing? It just goes to show you how powerful it can be when a husband and a wife say, you know what, enough is enough. We're going to do what we need to do to get out of debt. It's power in unity.
That's right. Are you looking to become debt free? We are here to help. We have a totally free guide called 8 Essential Steps to Getting Out of Debt. You can go to hisandhermoney.com/8 steps. That's the number 8. Again, that's hisandhermoney.com/8 steps to get your free copy.
Well, that's all we got for this time. It's been great. Until next time, peace.
Bye, y'all.